All right. Hello and welcome to this special episode of Mighty Finsights. I'm Rory Holland, your host and founder and CEO at Customer. With me today, I have two special guests. First, my friend and co-founder of Customer, Jack Macy. And Jack and I have been building financial and fintech brands for more than 15 years now. So Jack, awesome to have you here. Also with us today is Alex Bates, owner of Dark Rock Cybersecurity, a consultancy offering customized cybersecurity solutions for small businesses. Alex worked alongside us to help Customer with our SOC 2 process, and we're excited that he agreed to appear on Mighty Finsights. So in today's conversation, we'll be discussing the process we recently went through here at Customer to achieve our SOC 2 compliance and what we learned along the way. Gentlemen, really grateful to have you guys here today. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Honestly, SOC 2 can feel intimidating, particularly when I think about when we decided to enter into it here at Customer, and intimidating for a lot of folks in our industry, I suspect, as well. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys and with those that are listening the experience that we went through, and hopefully make the topic more accessible and a little bit less daunting. And we'll be covering some great questions, including how to decide if SOC 2 is right for you and your organization, why Customer decided to pursue SOC 2, and then some of the biggest challenges our team faced in the process. And before we dive in, I'm just going to read exactly what SOC 2 actually is for those of you who might be wondering it. And the reason why, part of the reason why we entered into it is it helps organizations build trust with their customers and stakeholders by demonstrating that they, the organization, have robust security practices in place to safeguard sensitive information. So with all that, I'm going to jump right in. And Jack, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah.
Why did we, as a marketing services agency, feel SOC 2 was essential for our company's health and our clients' protection?
Yeah. It was, like you said, it was a conversation we had for a while that really felt like the right choice once we got into it, but it felt a little daunting as we started to have that conversation. So we really recognized that there was two things that were the main reasons for us, and that it was an unusual step for a services-based agency to take. But we felt it was important enough for two main reasons. One was really to look after our own organizational and business health for Customer. So ensuring we have risk management best practices and guidelines in place for the systems we use, the team that uses that system, and for our clients. So on one hand, it's also protective of Customer and protective of our clients. It's also educational in the process, I think, for our team to really understand what's expected of them as a vendor for our clients, and what level is required in order to meet that expectation. So that was really great. The second main reason, I think, was really we wanted to reinforce our commitment to financial services companies. And we provide them with marketing services, with branding, with data services through marketing, that we want them to see us as a trusted vendor, and understand that we take risk management seriously, that we can be trusted, and that we care deeply about our work with them. I think those two were really the driving factors for us. And this was really forward-looking. We wanted to look into the future to see what we want Customer to be and what type of client services we want to provide well on for years to come.
Yeah. Thanks, Jack. Alex, welcome, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Rory. This is awesome.
All right. So from your perspective, maybe discuss a little bit about why SOC 2 matters for professional services organizations, or other organizations for that matter.
Of course. And thanks again for having me on Mighty Finsights. I think this is going to be exciting. Hitting on a few words that Jack said. We're gonna keep using the word trust, because it's going to be the buzzword of today's meeting. But ultimately, just boiling that down, business inherently is made because we don't entrust each other. That's why we use a known currency. That's why we ultimately do month-end reconciliations, transparency reports. Everything that we've created is ultimately, at the end of the day, to create visibility and to say, why should I go with company A versus company B versus company C. And so diving in on that word trust, the reason why a SOC 2 was ultimately created, because it's a little bit different. It's not necessarily pulling on the financial statements. It's not necessarily pulling on the ethics and board composition. It's really diving into security and the availability and confidentiality of all that data that ultimately companies are handling. And so in customers' situation, ultimately, your goal when you're working with some of your financial customers is to level up, is to basically say, you can trust me because of X, Y, Z. And in today's current measure, the SOC 2 is very much that vehicle to help accomplish it. Diving into some of the other considerations for financial companies as well as the industry as a whole, as you know, finance runs on compliance. You know, as I mentioned, some of those opportunities for reporting, for Schedule Ks, just everything that goes into the end of year, getting ready. This is where we ultimately go through SOC 2s, SOC 1s as well to see what are these reports that help our stakeholders as well as our customers understand how we can better make decisions to support our own investments down the road. And so I would say just diving into it, it's the biggest top A to Z to give your clients an understanding of what you do, as well as understanding how you do it in a secure manner.
Yeah, and in financial services and the fintech clients that we serve, historically, a lot of professional service agencies haven't pursued this. And we talked a little bit about this, Alex. I'm curious, when you think about for our industry that we serve, security is a requirement. It's how they have to operate. But then they have third-party vendors, partners, others like professional services firms, whether that's marketing like customer or other types of services might be provided. When you think about that, security is a requirement for them. What has been your experience working with professional services organizations, maybe like customer or adjacent to us, when they think about pursuing SOC 2? And then what is like the process they go through? Because there's probably so many different experiences you could share.
Of course. And just to kind of reiterate what you were saying there, Rory, customer as a whole, there's no regulatory requirements driving you to do this. So I do have to just give you guys some major props here, because this was a proactive compliance adjustment, which just positioned yourself completely different in the market than some of your peers. So I do have to just say that is a fantastic opportunity that was very much taken advantage of by you and Jack. One of the things that is really important to understand when understanding your third parties, when understanding your own clients, is ultimately you create your own ecosystem. And so similar to a sports team, when you're looking for that nice free agent pickup that would really help round out your offense or really give you that lockdown corner for defense, you want the same with your business partners as well. You want to make sure that they have the right pedigree, that they've done the right stuff, they've performed the due diligence, and they're also maintaining the due care. And so I think just from the consideration for looking into a golden standard go-to-market compliance certification like a SOC 2, I think that just shows it wasn't just the foundational check the box activity. It was let's make sure we're positioned in the market, in the race, and so that there's basically nothing stopping customer from being a trusted partner for their clients. But then kind of looking at your industry as a whole, I do have to say, and Jack and Rory, we've talked about this a little bit as well. You guys are mavericks in that sense. They're just going back to that point, there was nothing driving you to do this except, being able to demonstrate trust, and that transparency. And so when looking at that, specifically with some of the crackdown that is coming down from regulatory bodies as well, you have the SEC in the United States, where they're really starting to pop the lid over disclosures. What happens when there's a security incident? Well, it's really hard traditionally in the IT world to put a dollar amount on a data breach or to put a dollar amount on an IT incident, because it doesn't necessarily reflect in the financial statements, but it does reflect in the reputational value. And so when you do apples to oranges there, it starts to really paint a bigger picture of, okay, is this a nice to have, or is this us putting ourselves, forward in our own investment, in our own strategy and roadmap. And so I think that's ultimately the decisions that come into play as people are starting to wake up as well. Compliance very much has, I'd say, emerged into the executive, boardroom where you guys are making decisions for your own business. And if you don't make the right steps, it's really easy to, take 2 steps back as well. And just in regards to, a hiccup or something that wasn't done just properly in that sense.
Yeah. And you mentioned hiccup. Different forms of that, I suspect, when we think about some of the data breaches historically, or just talking about software failures as a whole. I think of like CrowdStrike and Microsoft for those of us that were sadly flying that day and getting hung up, and just the impact and ripple effects of that. Can you speak to maybe some of that in our industry too, Alex and Jack? You might have some thoughts on this too, because when we explored this as customer and deciding what we wanted to do, we certainly did our own research and investigating and know how important security is in protecting our customers' data and making sure that we're not only doing it the right way, but we're going above and beyond. And so can you speak to maybe some of those breaches?
Yeah. And not to go too heavy in the paint on CrowdStrike and Microsoft, but, I think that was the highlight of the summer of 2024 for many folks. That was ultimately 2 trusted partners of, as we quickly realized, almost 70% of the global economy was impacted by that. So that not only means there was an investment or a footprint there, but when you have CrowdStrike, a trusted vendor, interacting with Microsoft, which is also everywhere as well, it created ultimately a perfect storm for us. And so with a SOC 2, a lot of that ultimately does get fleshed out. You highlight and you identify some of those critical vendors. And we specifically did as well within the customer SOC 2. These are people that we trust. We review their SOC 2 as well. And at the end of the day, everything that we put in place is actually a mitigation factor. So when that happened, when basically 60% of all airline traffic over the European Union was shut down, people immediately went to something that we built for a customer as well, which was business continuity disaster recovery plans. We pulled up the incident response plan. And these are areas that teams, when they have the right steps in place, it's a break glass moment, and then you start to perform. It's similar to, when you are working with your family and you ultimately are saying, hey, if there is a fire, this is what we do. And then you coach it, you train it, you enforce it. And then in many organizations that recovered correctly, that was what they did. And these are the requirements of the SOC 2 as well. And so just in regards to really talking about that, there's, for the bleeding edge technology, these are ways that companies are mitigating it. Even going into the next example, Southwest, I'm not sure if it was covered too much in the CrowdStrike piece, but CrowdStrike Southwest wasn't actually affected because they were using such an older version of their operating system that it didn't even interact with CrowdStrike and the Microsoft updates at that point. And so there's two considerations. There is, insulate, what Southwest did, or there's bleeding edge, which a lot of companies are doing. And you have to find that right medium in risk management, in your IT operations, and all that ultimately comes into effect when you start to really map out how you do things.
We work a lot with a lot of the companies we work with. We deal with developing brands for them and strengthening those brands and figuring out the best way to express those brands to help them grow and thrive as an organization. And if you're a large enterprise organization like the ones we've mentioned, if you have a good plan for disaster recovery, likely you have the resources to weather the storm. But if you're a mid-sized company or heaven forbid, maybe even a startup, that's going to be a massive blow. And it's going to be much harder to come off of that from a reputation perspective. The financial, the technical work you might have to do, the remediation you might have to do is one thing, but the brand perception out there can hurt you dramatically when you don't have as big of a foothold in your industry. And so that's another consideration where we're kind of looking at it as an agency from both sides. One is we're helping you to create a great brand that's really strong, and we're also doing this for ourselves as part of the protection as being a vendor for you to make sure that brand stays viable for a long time.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean that's. Go ahead, Alex.
Oh no, I was just gonna say. I mean, it's totally right. It's the reason why we ultimately build policies, layer those controls in. It's all the stuff behind the scenes, but it's to be able to provide better assurances to your clients.
Yeah.
And Alex, you've been doing this for a long time with your organization, and you've worked with I'm certain other agencies, professional services firms, other third parties that chose to go this route too. When you think about it from the perspective of whether it's financial services or technology, do you see any other marketing agencies pursuing this?
No, and that was I think one of our first conversations with you guys was really understanding the purpose, and I think in many ways it's a reactive consideration. Oh, I'm going to lose a contract. I need to get this. I need to get this fast. I need to get this yesterday. You guys actually came onto the scene and did it in a completely different way, where you were saying, this is what we are seeing out there. How do we get to this level of standard? And I think it's fascinating to think about, because as other organizations watch customer and see the efforts that you and Jack put into implementing these processes, I think the biggest question and self-realization is, what's to stop us, as a small business to doing that same step? And so, Rory, to answer your question, I mean, it's rare.
Yeah, across services organizations, really. I mean, I imagine you mostly work with technology-based organizations or organizations with their own infrastructure, or that have significant dealings or data movement or things like that, and far less of any kinds of services organizations.
Exactly. And I think that's the cool part. And Jack, I think you and I saw this. SOC 2 can be tailored in many ways. It's more like going and getting your clubs fitted for you. Not everything fits right out the box. You need to, everyone has their own swing, everyone has their own style. And so I think that when your clients have the opportunity to read the customer SOC 2, it really built well, because it handles everything that you do, and it gets away from aspirational level work, which I believe a lot of people in marketing, specifically with the introduction of AI as well, everyone loves being aspirational or best in class, but it's not real. That's why a SOC 2 is so important, is because it ultimately, in order to get it published, you have to have a CPA come and put their brand, their identity on there. And I think it just is a completely different tone at the top than a lot of people with a lot of material out there.
Yeah, and Jack, I wanted to just pose a question here. When you think about all of the fintech and financial companies we serve, from your perspective, what do you think is some of the benefits or maybe value that our clients get knowing that they're working with a vendor that has a SOC 2?
I mean, like we've talked about, the biggest benefit that we see, but I think also that hopefully a prospective client would see, is the reduced risk for our clients. And then, for us, after that, it's our own risk. But really, first and foremost, this is how can we be a vendor and a service provider in a market in a authentic and trustworthy way, so that you're in good hands working with us. I think that's probably the biggest piece of it. I mean, there was definitely some challenges along the way with setting it up, and some interesting unexpected benefits too, as we went through the process with Alex. And Alex was a fantastic guide through the process, as there were many pieces of it that we didn't even know what they meant or what they were referring to, and he kind of laid out the structure and took us through that process. But it included things like establishing best practices for our internal processes around risk management, accountability, communication, even ethical conduct, some of the things that are kind of externally, shared and expected in SOC 2 type reporting, and then worked with us to update and implement our policies and documents and define and guide our mitigation of risk over time. He worked with us to set up, okay, what does your evaluation look like ongoing, your ongoing monitoring of your processes. Like a lot of agencies nowadays, particularly ones, since we're fully remote and our work is mostly based in the cloud, he also helped us evaluate our cloud-based systems and work those into the SOC 2 report as well. Where a services agency is often very different from the ones we mentioned before, in that we do have more capability to work in the cloud and we don't have to own our own technology systems. And so it was really important to go through all of those as part of this SOC 2 process with Alex guiding us, and leverage those technology systems, such as, Google Workspace, which is where our email and our document storage and our calendaring and other things live. And that's a benefit because they're already certified at the highest levels of security and risk management, and that benefit passes on through us. And Alex helped us organize all that in a way that helped us understand where we were on good footing and where we needed to shore things up. So it was really a very thorough and excellent process.
And now, Alex, wanted to come back to you and thinking about selecting a vendor. Like, when you think about the industry that you're in, the number of options that people have, whether those are like the big accounting firms, the Big Four, or other individual and smaller organizations, can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on how to best select a SOC 2 partner?
Yeah. And I think it's a great question, Rory. To really start that and identify the right partner for you is similar to when customer is approaching some financial clients as well. In many ways, you want a partner that can scale with you. You also want a partner that can, from a brand reputation, support you. If at the end of the day, you're asking yourself, why am I doing this? And if it's a check the box activity, traditionally, we've seen clients tend to find budget-friendly solutions for there. There are budget-friendly CPAs, as everyone knows when picking their tax preparer in many ways. But also, it comes with that reputation on the back end. The great part about SOC 2 and the CPA and the AI CPA as well is there's peer evaluation. So anyone that's actually putting a badge on their report from a CPA with the SOC 2 logo, that means that CPA has been evaluated and that they are meeting market standards. So it's really not an easy bumper sticker to get in that point. But again, it also goes back to that point. Is this in crude terms, is this an Amazon purchase, or is this, am I going in and going to Neiman Marcus to ultimately buy something off the shop? As you kind of progress with different styles, different types of firms, you'll see different levels of reputational review and so, selfishly from my own background, working from the Big Four. And so the Big Four is Pricewaterhouse, Ernst & Young, Deloitte, and KPMG. I had the opportunity to see some of the companies that, the Fortune 50s, 100, 500s, that needed that because these were brands that supported their stakeholders as well as their transparency and their values there. But I will say, for the small to medium-sized business, that some of these brands price themselves out of the market for them, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it wouldn't be a great logo for them to have. But I will say there are fantastic quality firms of individuals who were trained by those big firms that have really been popping up. And so I think when finding the right organization, it's one, finding an individual who can help and walk you through the requirements of a SOC 2 before the evaluation. And so, similar to as we talked about pioneering, finding that right guide, right? And so really making sure we're handling that. And then being able to digest some of the complexities of a SOC 2 into terms that make sense for your business. I think Jack and Rory, one of the things that we understand when we were talking about some of the vulnerability scans and some of the tech solutions as a whole, we were heavily pointing to some of your vendors because, again, with customers' tech stack as a whole, that wasn't us. And so we wanted to make sure that we made that clear and concise as well, because ultimately, if someone presented penetration test results to you, Rory, and you, Jack, I think it would be a little bit of a, how do we interpret this on the first go? But then obviously knowing that we do this as part of our annual review, then it goes to that next step. And so I do think when firms are interested, it's one, find someone that you can trust. Again, going back to trust, it's someone who can break down something complex into simplistic, business-oriented purposes, and then using them to help kind of leverage you and introduce yourself into different firms. It's all about, getting to know the firm, how their methodology works. And also, I'm a big believer of introducing that audit once, apply multiple ways. And so, for example, if you're doing a SOC 2, but all of a sudden you also have another regulation that comes into your ecosystem, hey, how can we do this instead of a bootstrapped, duct tape approach, let's do this holistically, let's build it correct. And then ultimately it becomes way less effort on the back end.
Yeah. So Alex, we've talked a little bit about your background in athletics, and you've played competitive lacrosse. I'm curious what your experience in growing up playing competitive sports and then the latter part of your career as an athlete in lacrosse applies to some of the work that you do today.
Yeah. It's funny. I read a lot of sports psychology books. I read a lot of, talking about ambition, talking about the drive. I think the one thing that competitive sports has really, driven out of me was maybe I'm not the most talented. Maybe I'm not the smartest in this immediate moment. But what it does do is it allows you to really challenge yourself. You're really only able to achieve those milestones if you've put it in the time, if you've done the reps, if you've ultimately, pushed yourself beyond. I mean, I remember growing up, not really knowing much, but watching old movies like Rudy, watching old movies that, where all of a sudden I'm 10 years old and I have a garbage bag over my body with a sweatsuit, just running, just to try to put in that extra time. That translates into professional services so heavily because a lot of it is, have I done this before? That muscle memory, but to that next level, do I have enough in the tank to make it across the finish line? I think it's just an important qualification because Rory, you and Jack being founders of a company, you guys have put in the late nights. You've put in the all-nighters, and it's not necessarily, can I do this? Am I sacrificing myself to do this? It's more, I need to do this in order to achieve what I'm looking for. And so in many ways, it's, if you're a basketball fan, really bringing in that Mamba mentality, of Kobe Bryant to say, I need to put my time into the practice in order for me to excel in the limelight. And I think that's what a lot of folks sometimes miss, specifically from your own training, but into your professional world. When you eventually hang up the cleats, when you say, I am no longer even though we are still athletes in our minds, I am any other title. I'm a father. I'm a professional. I'm a friend. It's in many ways, it's knowing how to prepare, knowing how to show up, and knowing how to execute. And I think that in many ways is the biggest thing that I would love to teach my kids. It's not about achieving. It's more about learning to fail and being able to recover and learn how to not do that same thing in the same piece. And so, the iterations, all that repetition, that's where I found most of the value in, drawing from sports. And of course, as you guys will see, I always look like Adam Schefter on a lot of our meetings because it's something that ties me into those experiences and memories so closely.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. And Jack, for you, also a competitive athlete still today. I love to see Jack's videos after his weekends of competing and running. Jack, when you think about our decision at Customer to pursue SOC 2, part of it was we wanted to be better. We wanted to be leading edge. We wanted to win not only for our clients, but for ourselves, but do it with having the SOC 2 in place. Like when you think about your competitive mindset, and I know you're traveling right now for a competitive race, how does that play into your thinking when we pursued a SOC 2?
Yeah, good question to reflect on. The thing that comes to mind for me most is the notion of having a very thoughtful and informed training plan to get to the goal you want to achieve. And that training plan is typically based on experience of what works, and you attempt to follow it in order to meet your goal. Well, I think there's a similar piece here. Alex was essentially our coach, our trainer, and he came in with a plan and a pathway to meet our goal. And that's critical if you really want to achieve that high level of excellence and performance, whether it's in your sports or in your life or in your business. And I think that that piece was really foundational. So having somebody come in and we knew where we wanted to get to, and we knew we had the capacity to do good things as an agency for a financial services company, but we wanted to get this one piece in place, and having somebody coach you to get you there and follow a tried and true method to get there was critical. And it's the same with running. And if you don't put in the long hours and the time, it's much harder to get the result you're looking for.
Yeah, and when you think about the types of organizations that may be thinking about SOC 2, what is some advice or guidance you could provide to those folks that are listening that might be thinking about pursuing a SOC 2 to know whether it's right for them and their organization?
Yeah, I think the business driver needs to be at the end of the day, because as you and Jack saw, Rory, it is an investment of internal resources, of external resources to see what we need to do. We had to build a learning management system for you guys, and so training your own employees, understanding that this is now a value that we ultimately need to attain to. And I think looking at if you're a big believer of game theory, the game theory always presents two strategies. We can win now, or we can win in the long term, which is surviving. And so I think the companies that are investing for the future, investing for best practice instead of consistently being reactive, those are the companies that survive and make it to the exit or whatever their goals are within the company.
Yeah, and Jack, I was going to pose something for you. When you think about what we experienced coming through it, what were maybe recounting some of the challenges we faced, whether that was operationally, mentally?
Yeah, I think it's interesting as I listened to Alex, because for us, because we didn't have this huge technology infrastructure that we had to thoroughly go through, probably our biggest challenges are more on the people side, people, permissions, best practices and guidelines for the team. So, and a lot of the people that work for us have worked much of their lives in service-oriented companies. Not all of them, but some. And so it's different than what you might typically experience at a larger, more tech-driven organization. Most agencies, I've worked at a few in my life, don't have clear policies for managing risk and are used to kind of flying by the seat of their pants to get things done and delivered, and security and risk management is often an afterthought, and we didn't want to live with that type of risk. And so the biggest challenge there is, I think, after Alex walked us through and we got certified, really bringing the team along in that journey and helping to make sure that they're educated, that they do the training that we had as part of it, but that we also continue to educate them over time and really create a little bit of a mind shift in our organization, because we work with financial services organizations that really value that trust in a vendor, that they need to understand that. And here are the processes and practices you need to do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis in order to ensure that. I would say for us, that was probably the biggest one, is kind of bringing the team along.
And just to add to that as well, Jack, I think the whole SOC 2 exercise is important because it's not necessarily saying we don't do that. I think within customer, Rory, you and Jack have talked about things that affect your business, external, regulatory, financial changes, all that is discussed. But I think what a SOC 2 actually enforces you to do is formalize it. How do we actually demonstrate we have done that? We did walk the walk. We did the reps before the test type of thing. And I think that is where a lot of organizations, even going through this exercise as an achievement just to do the exercise is so important, because you can say, hey, out of all the 1 through 9 common criteria, I think this is, an important thing to realize. Where's our gap assessment as well? And really as well, when people talk about SOC 2, it's not necessarily a certification. I hope that it's more like when you go to the grocery store and you're putting fruits and vegetables onto the scale, and all of a sudden it hits, what you're trying to achieve. It's a report of compliance, to that point. So you built something that was basically ready for, in your mind, it was ready for the industry, it was ready for business. But then when you bring in a third party to evaluate it, it's their opinion in many ways to say, is this ready for operation? And I think that's an important thing, because SOC 2 gets thrown in the mix of, oh, we're certified. No, we're compliant, and here's our report to demonstrate our level of compliance as well.
There's one point I want to jump on real quick, because I think you just remind me that this was really a major piece on our minds, Rory and I's mind, as we went into this process, which was the gap analysis you mentioned. So it's that sense of, well, we're generally, I think, doing things right, but I don't want to assume, and I want to make sure there's no major holes or flaws, or we're doing something that really is not validated by external measures that most people use. And I bet that's on the mind of a lot of people who are contemplating doing a SOC 2 type certification, particularly if there's a services company, is, I don't know what I don't know, and that kind of scares me. So I think that gap analysis was a big motivator for us, as well as really making sure that we're plugging any leaks and doing things well.
Exactly. And, I think just from, soup to nuts in many ways, when we started that process, Jack, I think I remember presenting the controls to you and Rory, and just it immediately is one of those areas where we go, oh no, how do we do this? And I go, no, step by step, let's see, because you'll see things map in different areas. We build one policy, it flies into, 5 different requirements. And so it was one of those things where as you go, it's that iterative process of just saying, oh, no, this is exactly what we do, and this is how we do it. And maybe not the way that's written, but let's make sure that we really make that ours in one way as well. And again, I think that's the way that the report is designed. And I mentioned some of those categories, 1 through 9 before. That's what are called, those requirements are called the trust service criteria in many ways. And so the trust service criteria from 1 through 9 is supposed to take you on that journey. And I think I remember showing you guys the heat map that I built on it. The first, couple are really based off entity level controls, which is tone at the top. How do you and Rory run the organization? The ethics, the values, the communication, the details of job descriptions, background checks, who you let into your ecosystem is so important, and basically how you maintain that. Then on the back end, those trust service criteria are really focused on the access, how you handle change, how you handle operations, and some of those security controls, as well as continuity. Again, the end of the day is if we want to ensure and provide trust to our clients, we have to make sure that we're here today. And so that the SOC 2 gets us there. But with some of the exercises, it also ensures that we're here tomorrow, so that we're able to support their own goals, their own measures, and we'll be there along the way. And so again, just kind of props to you guys. It was a fun exercise, I will say, and you guys took everything in stride. And it's exciting to see where you guys are going to continue to take it.
Yeah, I mean, you providing that roadmap from how to get to where we started to certified was massive. Like, I think anybody thinking about this, it's not something you can easily do on your own, even if you've maybe done one in another company. Like, it's pretty much a requisite to use somebody like you who knows the background of these types of certification processes, but also has that roadmap ready to go, and then to customize to fit your organization, how best to manage risk in your specific context. And I think that was incredibly valuable to have that, and you guiding us through it along the way.
Of course, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure, Jack and Rory.
Well, this has been great, guys. For any other companies that are listening, if you guys want to talk to Jack or myself, we'd be happy to share more details about our experiences going through this process and can make recommendations. Of course, you can connect with Alex Bakes, Dark Rocks Cybersecurity on LinkedIn. You can find his website. We'll put Alex in. We'll put a link to your website in the show notes, as well as your LinkedIn, so folks can find you. At this point, gentlemen, really appreciate you guys making the time this morning. Good to see you guys. Really interesting topic. Hopefully it was helpful to everyone.
Likewise, Rory. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Rory. Thank you, Jack. And again, just for this, you guys really knocked it out of the park. So this was a fun one.
Team effort, sure.
Thank you for listening to the Mighty Finsights podcast and sharing this brief glimpse into our SOC 2 compliance process. There are many more episodes on our website at customer.com, that's CSTMR.com, or wherever great podcasts are found. You'll find one-on-one interviews with fintech leaders and more special content like this, including a mini-series on branding that I did with Customer's Chief of Brand, Dan Ocock. This show is produced and distributed by Customer, a digital fintech marketing agency. Our production team includes Zach Garver, Becky Dombrowski, Brad Jerger, Romina Gomez, and Baylin Encuro.